Welcome to our Minecraft crash course on Mao Zedong, a pivotal figure in modern Chinese history. In this series, we'll explore Mao's life, ideas, and the historical context of his era within the immersive world of Minecraft. First, let's start off with the economic conditions that China was in before Mao and how he would be able to use it to his advantage. 90% of peasants rented the land they worked on and were at the mercy of their landlords, which could raise rent or evict them without warning. Also, the growing population made the farmable land more unobtainable for peasants to lose their land and mass unemployment and poverty in China. In addition, during warlord time, Chinese peasants were exposed to corruption, experienced exploitation, unemployment, inflation, and famine. Warlords didn't care about anything other than gaining territory and wealth. Along with poor economic state the country was already in, war would further strain the country's economy. The Sino-Japanese War left China in even more economic stress, along with leaving thousands of people dead and many losing their land and homes. The war caused goods to go up and hyperinflation. The nationalist government tried to resolve it by increasing taxes, borrowing money from the US, nationalized the private banks, and kept increasing the paper currency. This would ultimately fail, causing people to lose support for them. Also, the social divisions the country was in greatly benefited Mao's goal for political power. Resentment was growing to wealthy places like Shanghai by the lower class peasants because they had urban developments and was full of opportunities. Women had little power and little education. After the Xinhai Revolution and the death of Yuan Shikai, it left China with no central government, which gave power to the warlords. Mao Zedong was able to establish the first Chinese Soviet Republic in 1921, which had a total population of 3 million by 1932. During this time, he Japanese invaded Manchuria in 1931 after the Mukden incident. In 1937, Japan invaded further into China, which began the Second Sino-Japanese War. During this war, China suffered significant military defeats, millions of civilian lives, and experienced horrors such as the Nanking Massacre. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, took advantage of this war to expand the territory under their control in the north and rural areas. The GMD, also known as the Kuomintang or the Chinese National Party, was weakened by war with the Japanese, so they couldn't defend their land. Jiang Jieshi, the president of the Kuomintang, was more concerned about the growing influence of the communists on local populations rather than the Japanese invasion. As the war progressed, support for the GMD decreased. They could not prevent the atrocities perpetrated against Chinese civilians, for example, the Nanjing Massacre, nor stop the advance of the Japanese army, which by 1941 had taken many cities such as Shanghai and Guangzhou. Jiang Jieshi made military decisions that killed hundreds of thousands of Chinese people. For example, in order to stop the Japanese advance, Jiang Jieshi, without warning, ordered the destruction of the Yellow River's dikes, which flooded the villages located on the riverbank and killed many peasants in the process. The conduct of the GMD towards the local population was dreadful. Stories of nationalist troops looting and vandalizing villages as well as raping women were common and widespread. The Civil War also exposed many defects that the GMD had. The GMD had more soldiers and resources initially, but lacked effective training, morale, and support. Continuous fighting and lack of payment demoralized GMD troops, leading to desertion. The GMD failed to win significant battles against the PLA, showcasing military weaknesses. Jiang Jieshi's leadership lacked support from the masses due to corruption and inefficiency. Internal divisions within the GMD, including opposition factions and high-ranking officer defections. Jiang Jieshi's poor judgment in appointing commanders based on loyalty rather than ability. Economic challenges like rampant inflation undermined the GMD's stability. Jiang Jieshi's reliance on enforcement instead of building genuine support contributed to the GMD's downfall. Mao was able to use these weaknesses to ramp him up to further his political power. Mao Zedong, born in 1893 to a prosperous peasant family in Hunan province, received his education in a Changsha college, focusing on world history, literature, and Chinese and European philosophy. He later moved to Beijing, where he worked as a librarian assistant under Chen Duxiu at Beijing University, through whom he was introduced to Marxism. As a rebellious teenager, Mao rejected traditional customs and harbored a deep disdain for foreign powers' dominance over China, feeling humiliated by the economic exploitation that had occurred. Ports like Shanghai, Fuzhou, Chongqing, and Shandong were under the influence of countries like the UK, Germany, USA, and France, with foreign merchants benefiting from tax exemptions. This fueled Mao's involvement in the May 4th movement. Upon joining the CCP in 1921, when it had just 50 members, Mao immediately began organizing activist groups in his native Hunan, showcasing his ability to mobilize and inspire people for the communist cause. By 1926, when the Comintern directed the CCP to collaborate with the GMD in a united front, Mao's organizational prowess earned him a promotion to political organizer for both parties' Central Committee. During this period, he actively encouraged peasants to confront warlords while disseminating communist ideology among rural communities. Mao Zedong's ideology, called Maoism, combined Marxist ideas, Chinese nationalism, and his unique views on revolution and governance. He believed that China's rural peasants, not urban workers, were the force for revolution due to their majority status. This nationalist fervor drove his efforts to make China independent and strong. Mao saw class struggle as ongoing, leading to initiatives like the Cultural Revolution. His ideology was influenced by traditional Chinese values, emphasizing collective action over individual interests. Mao wrote political pieces in Yan'an, expecting members to follow. Disloyal members went on trial, confessed crimes during the Yan'an rectification movement. The CCP used coercion to enforce Mao's ideology, remolding members' minds. Fujian Incident, 1930, marked Mao's rise to power, reflected authoritarian methods. Mao ordered arrest, torture, execution of Red Army members suspected as GMD agents or urban proletarian revolution supporters. Hundreds were executed with varying estimates of those arrested, tortured, or killed, 10,000 to 70,000. Agrarian policies, 1928 to 1949, involved extreme objectives implemented with violence. Policies included confiscation, redistribution of land from landlords, rich peasants, to poorer peasants. Exploited peasants sometimes resorted to violence, murder without official instructions, leading to widespread brutality. Persuasion and propaganda were integral to the Communist Party of China's CCP strategies under Mao Zedong's leadership. Their purpose was to influence beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors, employing various methods such as emotional appeals, storytelling, symbolism, personal testimonies, and visuals. These tactics aimed to emphasize heroism, sacrifices, and ideological associations, eliciting responses of patriotism, loyalty, and commitment from the audience. Through narratives of struggle and resilience, the CCP connected its ideologies and leaders with heroic actions and noble causes, inspiring long-term effects on cultural narratives, national identity, and collective memory. Beyond direct propaganda, the CCP contrasted itself with the Kuomintang, GMD, portraying a more civilized and caring approach towards the Chinese people. This was reflected in policies focused on improving peasant lives, which led to significant party membership growth between 1937 and 1945, driven by initiatives like literacy promotion, healthcare provision, and land reform. During Mao Zedong's leadership, the nature, extent, and treatment of opposition within the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, were severe and multifaceted. Mao initiated anti-campaigns like the Three Anti-Campaign, specifically targeting political opponents and capitalists, especially the wealthy. Those deemed enemies of the state, including parts of the government and the middle class, faced trials, purges, and psychological pressure, leading to humiliation, torture, labor camp sentences, and even death. The severity of treatment depended on the perceived extremity of opposition, with more radical dissenters facing harsher consequences. Landlords were particularly targeted, publicly humiliated, tried in people's tribunals, and often executed, while CCP members like Gao Gang and Rao Shushi faced expulsion or suicide due to their perceived opposition or criticisms. Others, like Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, were accused of taking a capitalist road, publicly shamed, and subjected to house arrest or discrimination. Special labor camps like Laojiao and Laogai were used to re-educate and punish dissenters, forcing them to align with communist ideology through rigorous labor and ideological courses. These methods underscored Mao's ruthless consolidation of power and suppression of dissent within the CCP. The domestic economic policies that were placed was Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962, also known as the Five-Year Plan. The aim was for rapid industrialization and modernization of China's economy to outdo the West. Collectivization of agriculture through the formation of communes to increase agricultural productivity, emphasis on backyard furnaces and small-scale industry to boost steel production and overall industrial output. The Four Pest campaign was intended to improve hygiene by eliminating sparrows, rats, flies, and mosquitoes. This resulted to economic chaos and disruptions, resulting in widespread famine and a significant decline in agricultural output. 55 million people died due to starvation and other related causes, making it one of the deadliest famines in history. The domestic political policies that was placed was the attack on revisionism and Red Guards, 1966. This campaign targeted those within the Communist Party who were seen as deviating from revolutionary principles. Mao aimed to purify the party and maintain ideological orthodoxy. The Red Guards were a student-led paramilitary group that Mao mobilized to enforce ideological purity, target perceived enemies of the revolution, and promote class struggle. However, most of the time, the Red Guards were ordered by the CCRG. The attack on revisionism led to the purging of prominent figures like Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, who were the saviors of the consequences of economic policies such as the Great Leap Forward, consolidating Mao's control and reinforcing a more hardline ideological stance. The Red Guards carried out mass purges, attacked intellectuals, destroyed cultural artifacts, and disrupted traditional social structures. Schools and universities were shut down as students joined the movement, resulting in a lost generation of educational opportunities. The domestic cultural policies were the Cultural Revolution, 1966, and August Rally. The Cultural Revolution aimed to purge the remnants of capitalist and traditional elements from Chinese society and promote his version of revolutionary communist ideology. The goal was to create a society of equals, free from class distinctions and bourgeois influences. The August Rally marked the height of the Cultural Revolution's mobilization efforts. Mao aimed to rally support for his policies among students, workers, and the Red Guards, young revolutionaries. The Cultural Revolution had a devastating impact on Chinese society. It led to widespread chaos, violence, and persecution. Schools and universities were shut down, intellectuals were sent to rural areas for re-education, and traditional cultural artifacts were destroyed. The August Rally intensified the chaos of the Cultural Revolution. It empowered radical elements within society, including the Red Guards, to target and attack perceived enemies of the revolution. The rally fueled a period of intense political indoctrination, mass mobilization, and the creation of a cult of personality around Mao. Mao Zedong had immense influence in China, primarily through his carefully crafted image permeating all aspects of society. His charismatic leadership served as an informal form of social control, as there were no apparent distinctions between Mao, the government, and the Chinese populace. Promising peace and prosperity to a nation weary from wars and corruption, Mao connected with the people, particularly the rural majority constituting 90% of the population. He strategically positioned himself as part of their land and society, further enhancing his appeal and legitimacy. The publication of the Little Red Book during the Cultural Revolution outlined Mao's thoughts and ideologies. Despite the thundering Cultural Revolution, China staunchly supported Mao, allowing him to lead despite his advancing age, a testament to the enduring loyalty and belief in his leadership capabilities within the population. The dissemination of propaganda during Mao Zedong's era was pervasive and multifaceted, utilizing various mediums such as posters, media, literature, and visual imagery. Recognizing high illiteracy rates among the Chinese population, visual propaganda became predominant. The Cultural Revolution mandated every home to display a portrait or sculpture of Mao Zedong, portraying him as a godlike figure, reinforcing his cult of personality. Propaganda posters filled public spaces and, due to their affordability, even served as wallpaper for poorer households. Radios and loudspeakers amplified propaganda messages, further saturating the environment with ideological content. Role models like Lei Feng, whose good deeds became looked up to, were also used as propaganda symbols, although historians debate the authenticity of his existence. Overall, propaganda played a pivotal role in shaping public perception, reinforcing loyalty to Mao's leadership and promoting ideological conformity throughout Chinese society. The impact of foreign policy success or failure on the Chinese Communist Party's maintenance of power was significant during Mao Zedong's era. Mao's leadership positioned China as a new face of communism after Stalin, emphasizing friendly relations with the USSR initially. However, strained relations with the United States escalated tensions, contributing to the Korean War, which, despite its outcomes, further solidified U.S. commitment to supporting Taiwan. Mao skillfully utilized the war's outcome as propaganda to bolster his image and portray it as a success. Conflicting foreign policy views with the USSR led to substantial conflicts, prompting China to improve relations with the US due to tensions with the Soviet Union. This strategic maneuvering in foreign policy suggests that China adapted its approach to international relations to benefit its power dynamics, highlighting the CCP's approach to maintaining and potentially enhancing its authority on the global stage. The policies towards women in Mao's China was Sangan marriage laws or the 1954 constitution. The culture of Sangan began before Mao back to Confucius times when women's roles were primarily kinship roles: daughter, sister, wife, daughter-in-law, mother, and mother-in-law. In all these roles, it was incumbent on women to accord with the wishes and needs of closely related men, their fathers when young, their husbands when married, and their sons when widowed. This goes against communism, where everybody is equal. Thus, Mao's implementation of the 1954 Constitution essentially legitimized women's rights politically, socially, and culturally. This was further exemplified by the Great Leap Forward and collectivization, where women and men were treated the same, all being peasants. However, despite Mao's implementation of laws that were aimed at pushing for and protecting women, no one enforced the rules, thus nullifying any hard work that the women did. They would still be viewed as lesser than men. What was the impact policies for minorities? The biggest issue that Mao faced when attempting to demolish religion in China was that it was too large. Thus, the solution that Mao came up with was to divide each religion and manipulate the teachings towards more communist ideologies. Thus, Mao created his propaganda machines, and the resistors were punished and sent to Laogui and/or were kicked out of the churches. The West attempted to fight back, however, failed as their reach was limited to only words of encouragement to fight back. During Mao's attempts to get rid of religion altogether, the one that targeted the most was Islam, as they were the largest and most explicit. Of the Islamic population in China, there were four that he singled out the most, them being Uyghur, Kazakh, Hui, and Kyrgyz. His targeting included sending them to Laogui to get executed, and by forcing them into labor, sending them into special camps just for Muslims all across China. The targeted attacks are still felt today, as the propaganda established during his reign over China are still in effect, more specifically towards the Uyghur. The extent of China's authoritarian control remains challenging to quantify due to the country's status as a one-party state with high levels of secrecy. Evidence regarding China's level of authoritarianism is vague, but by examining censorship and control methods, it can be inferred that China was among the most totalitarian states of the 20th century. In China's political culture, citizens were expected to accept their societal status, conform to social norms, and acquiesce to leadership without being directly subject to the state. Mao Zedong's ideology, known as Maoism, aimed to expand totalitarian control through three key areas. First, Mao emphasized the importance of peasants in shaping a communist society due to their resilience in physical labor, valuing this over intellectual contributions. He advocated for experiencing different jobs to eliminate class distinctions, believing in a permanent revolution to constantly renew revolution. Mao's policies, such as the Great Leap Forward, aiming to break down bourgeois individualism through mass mobilization and forced labor, despite instances where the state temporarily lost control. Mao's use of anarchy and fear tactics, facilitated by CCP's military control and lack of independent justice, enabled him to maintain power for an extended period. The cult of personality surrounding Mao further solidified obedience among citizens, even during times of failure like the Great Leap Forward's disastrous consequences, which he skillfully diverted blame from, illustrating a complex interplay between control, propaganda, and public perception. Thank you so much for listening.